When we think about the power centers of Texas, you picture the skyscrapers in Houston, the big financial hubs in Dallas. We just kind of assume they were always destined to be on top. But what if I told you that the modern landscape of Texas power wasn't shaped by what was built, but by what was completely and utterly destroyed? Okay, let's dive into this incredible story. So here's this central mystery we're going to unpack today. How on earth did a city that was called the Wall Street of the Southwest, a city destined for greatness, just vanish from the top? And how did another, a small kind of muddy town, rise up to become the energy capital of the world? Well, the answer lies in one single, absolutely terrifying night. First, to really get the scale of this, we need to understand exactly what was lost. We have to rewind the clock to the turn of the 20th century and really paint a picture of Galveston's immense wealth and what seemed like its completely unstoppable future. And look, I'm not exaggerating here. Back then, Houston was really just a swampy town on the bayou. Galveston was the center of everything. It had more millionaires per person than almost anywhere else in the United States. If you wanted power, if you wanted money, if you wanted culture in the South, you went to Galveston. Period. But all of this incredible wealth, all this opulence, was built on a foundation with a hidden and absolutely critical vulnerability. A fatal flaw that, as you're about to see, everybody knew was there, and everybody just chose to ignore. And you can just see the sophistication here, right? This was high tech for the time. We're talking electric lights, a state-of-the-art telephone network. I mean, Galveston wasn't just some port. It was a booming metropolis. The entire Texas cotton trade, the economic engine of the state, flowed right through its docks. And all that money built these gorgeous mansions and opera houses that could rival New York, which of course makes what happens next so much more tragic. And there it is. That's the fatal flaw. All of that wealth, all that ambition was built on the shakiest foundation imaginable. They were living on basically a flat pancake of sand sticking right out into what we now know is Hurricane Alley. Think about that number for a second. 9 feet. That was the highest point on the entire island. So most of that glittering city, with all its fancy mansions and concert halls, was sitting just 4 or 5 feet above the waves of the Gulf of Mexico. The danger was just immense, and it was always there. This quote, it's just chilling to read now. It's from the guy in charge of weather forecasting for the whole area, Isaac Cline. And this wasn't just wishful thinking, this was like official doctrine. This incredible sense of hubris, this belief that they were somehow untouchable, it set the stage for an unimaginable disaster. So this is where our story takes a turn. The mood gets a lot darker. We're going to look at how this monster storm approached and the series of terrible miscalculations that left a city of thousands completely and utterly defenseless. You got to remember, weather forecasting in 1900 was really primitive. They mostly relied on reports from ships. So the main office back in D.C., they saw a storm brewing in the Gulf, but they got the path disastrously wrong. They thought for sure it would curve away towards Florida. But instead, it was getting stronger and heading straight for Texas. So let's just walk through these final terrifying hours. In the morning, Isaac Cline, the same guy from that quote, he realizes something is terribly wrong. The tide is swelling in a way he's never seen. He raises the hurricane warning flags, but honestly, it's already too late. By the middle of the afternoon, the rising water has completely swamped the railroad bridges, cutting off the only escape routes to the mainland. The trap had snapped shut. And that's how many people were now stuck on that sandbar. 37,000 souls with absolutely no high ground to run to, and a monster Category 4 hurricane bearing down on them as night began to fall. All right, so the tone now shifts to just pure chaos and destruction. We're about to see the sheer, overwhelming power of a storm that would literally, and I mean literally, wipe a city off the map. So remember we said the island's highest point was only 9 feet? This was the wall of water that hit it, a 15-foot-high storm surge. In a matter of minutes, the entire city was just swallowed by the Gulf of Mexico. And at the exact same time, the city was being ripped to shreds by winds hitting 140 miles per hour. Slate roofs were torn from mansions and basically turned into deadly blades flying through the streets. But the wind wasn't the real killer. No. It was what the water did next. This is a horrifying idea, but it's the key to understanding just how total the destruction was. The storm didn't just flood the city, it weaponized the city against itself. The wreckage of the first few rows of houses became a battering ram that just obliterated the next row, and that battering ram got bigger and more destructive as it ground its way across the entire island, a rolling mountain of death. The final number is it's staggering. The official death toll is over 8,000 people, though some experts think it could be as high as 12,000. To this day, it is still the deadliest natural disaster in United States history. I mean, to put that in perspective, more people died in that one night in Galveston than in Pearl Harbor and 9/11 combined. When the sun rose the next day, Galveston was just gone. It was replaced by this silent wasteland of splintered wood and mud. The ground was too soaked to bury the dead, and when they tried burial at sea, the tides just brought the bodies right back to shore. To stop the spread of disease, they were forced to build these huge funeral pyres on the beaches, a horrific task that went on for weeks. Now, it would be easy to end the story right there, in all that despair. But what happened next is one of the most incredible stories of human resilience and engineering you'll ever hear. The survivors didn't just rebuild, they basically declared war on the ocean itself. They launched two of the most ambitious engineering projects in American history at the time. First, they built a fortress, a massive 17-foot-high concrete seawall. But the second step was something out of science fiction. They decided if the island was too low, they would just raise it. This process was just monumental. They dredged sand and silt from the seafloor and pumped it into the city as this liquid sludge. Every single home, every church, every building had to be physically lifted up on thousands of jack screws, while the new ground level was pumped in underneath it. They literally lifted their entire city out of the ocean's reach. And this is what brings our story full circle. Because while Galveston was busy fighting its war with the ocean, the world of business and finance was watching. And this is where we finally answer that question we asked at the very beginning. This was the storm's ultimate legacy. Galveston survived, sure, but its moment as the New York of the South was over. Investors were terrified. They wanted a safe harbor far away from the coast. So they turned their attention 50 miles inland to that muddy little town, Houston. They poured money into dredging a deep-water port, the Houston Ship Channel, and systematically rerouted Galveston's entire economy inland. So we'll end on this thought. History so often turns on just a few feet of elevation or a tiny change in a storm's path. If that hurricane had veered just a few degrees east, is it possible the economic capital of Texas might still be a city on a sandbar? It really makes you wonder how many other places that we think of as permanent are really just the product of some long-forgotten disaster.